Welcome to the NCDWI Guy podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI Guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 172 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I have Timothy Pavone joining me to discuss how he has built his practice from 0 to 10,000 plus clients. Timothy has done this through being genuine. He's done it through creating a great culture for his employees. He's done it through one phone call at a time, through building great communication with his clients. It really is a great conversation to see how to use these small building blocks, these grains of sand that collectively add up into a really thriving practice. It was a fun conversation to have with Tim. Tim was a basketball player in middle school and high school, and you can hear his competitive nature come out in today's episode. It was just a blast of a conversation to have with Tim, and I hope you all enjoyed as much as I did. Well, Tim, I am pumped to have you on the podcast and get a little bit of your story. You know, you've got an incredible business model. I love the personality that comes out on your website, and the kind of emphasis on client connection that is part of your branding. So I'm excited to get into all of that, but before we get too far down the road, what got you into criminal defense in the first place? You know, how did you end up in law school? What in law school sparked the criminal defense interest? Take us through the journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Huge fan. Got to let you know that.
I'm pumped.
I'd be driving to Gaston or Cabarrus when I first got started, and I'd have a DWI trial, and I'd be listening to the podcast.
That's
on
awesome.
whatever my issue is, because you pretty much have every issue on there. So definitely using case law from what you've had on there, and the tips, and how to present it to the judge or your client. So if you're a young lawyer, I would be tapped into your podcast, and you guys are keeping up with the law too. So great podcast. So
appreciate the promo. I appreciate it.
Very happy to be here. So me, law school, I needed something to do. I grew up a competitive person, and I had a extremely good work ethic when it came to basketball. I loved basketball. I still love playing basketball. And I was one of those people where I heard, like, if you're not training, someone else somewhere else is. And I kind of just always had that toughness and that mentality that I need to try my hardest. And
what position? What basketball?
Point guard. We're talking Magic Johnson, Steph Curry, a little bit of both.
Running the floor.
Running the floor, 100%. So I think some of that competitiveness comes out for law school. It's like, you have a chance to speak to a jury. I mean, this is broad strokes. When you're looking at it, you're like, hey, you can talk to a jury, argue with the judge, and win a case. I think that kind of sparked my interest, so I gave it a shot. Graduated, and it's not like I was like, I have to do criminal defense. It wasn't really. I was up for whatever really I could do, and for me, probably different than most people. I walked in the courthouse, and I just started, that's where the cases are. That's where the people are. I was like, how do I do this? So I started meeting people in the courthouse, and that's how I started getting started with mailers and criminal law. Shout out to Susan Rode, Chip Panett, Chuck Monet, Chris McCartan, Joe Ledford, Pamela Babb, rest in peace. She was a clerk at Mecklenburg County. So many people that helped me get started. And if you're going to do it the way I did it, you got to pick up the phone and pick the brain, because you're not going to know what you're doing in the beginning.
Totally.
Criminal defense. But that is, if you're going to go solo and then try to build something like I've tried to do, I think that's a good practice area to do that. That's where you have an opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. Couple of things that, the reason I ask about the position, to be kind of interesting to like look at different sports and then people that end up as like small business owners and the position that they played, because in basketball, the game runs through the point guard, right? Like you got to get everybody else involved. You gotta be dishing out the ball as much or probably more than you're shooting. I mean, depends on the kind of the game that each person has, but there's definitely a lot of that kind of like going through the point guard. So I'm gonna have to start like a tally and see what position was played in each sport. I love that. I think that the competitive mindset is so valuable. Like, I think it's one thing that attracts a lot of like former athletes into the law, because it is like a very competitive environment. And it can be competitive in a good way. I think that there's that like buildup of competition, and, you're going up against the state, and you feel that, kind of, adrenaline and energy as you're preparing for trial. In the criminal defense world, I think there's just such a value to that competitive spirit. In the civil world, sometimes I feel like it gets totally out of hand in terms of the like competitive nature, just, throwing other members of the bar under the bus, and, threatening, grievances and sanctions. And it's just like, look, guys, like we all gotta live. So I don't miss that at all. But I think in the criminal world, it's like the best get your juices, flowing, competitive environment that exists outside of sports.
Yeah. And then you get what you're referring to a little bit too is sportsmanship too. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
If you're a poor sport, you'll probably be like the person that you were just talking about, threatening sanctions or, being ridiculous. Not my game plan. But we do car accidents, criminal, traffic. The criminal is probably the most competitive. Unfortunately, when it comes down to it, someone hires you to win. And
that's right. They do.
They do want to win. If you do a good job, you're the best attorney in the world. If you win the case, you're the best attorney in the world. If you lose the case, no matter how good you did, you're the worst attorney ever. So that's kind of my experience so far.
Yeah, and I think it's also so important, like you were mentioning, to reach out to other people that have been doing it for a long time, or can kind of act in that mentor role, especially as a young lawyer, but even into years of practice. I think that's such a valuable thing. And so many guests that have come on the podcast have just emphasized that need to be courageous, and instead of sitting there kind of wondering, how am I supposed to do this thing, just ask somebody. I mean, it's such a big deal to just reach out to somebody that's been doing it for a long time and pick their brain about it. Particularly in the criminal defense bar, I don't have as much experience on the civil side of things, but in the criminal defense bar, almost anybody that you reach out to is happy to pick up the phone. So if you're in the Charlotte area, give Tim a ring and bother him a little bit.
I would have to hear people out, because I would be a huge hypocrite if I didn't. So yes, I'll definitely say that's no problem.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's just huge. It's so helpful to have that kind of sounding board for ideas, and figure out even basic things, where to file something, which DA to talk to, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just really helpful to have somebody that has kind of been there before. So in terms of kind of criminal practice, when you guys get a call from a client, traffic ticket, DWI, larceny charge, whatever it might be, what is kind of your big picture process in terms of communication with the client? What do you kind of focus on during the consultation?
So we are trying to sign them up on the phone first time on the call. I'm not, I'm guessing a lot of firms focus on having them come in for a consultation, which is fine. But I want to sign them up right on the phone. Car accident, criminal, traffic. Initially, let's get this sign up going so we can go from there. Because I'm not going to give you advice unless you're my client. Once you're my client, we'll get the ball rolling. We're going to answer the phone 8 to 5. It's going to happen. And then if you text us, we're going to text you back. It's amazing sometimes that I talk to people and they can't find a criminal defense attorney for, even just a couple of misdemeanors. Like, well, I'm having trouble finding a lawyer. I'm like, are you kidding me?
There's 500 people.
The competition is very, very stiff.
Yeah.
So we're ready to sign people up. It's tough to get the calls. Once you get the calls, I want to be able to sign them up. So I definitely try to get them to sign up as quickly as I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've been calling a lot of lawyers about the Freedom Fighter Summit that we have coming up to kind of talk to them about that. And so as I've been kind of calling each law office, it is interesting because some law offices like yours, phone is just answered like first thing. Like it is just like almost before like the ring is happening on that end, you're getting through. Other attorneys, you call, it's 7 rings, it goes to voicemail. I don't get a call back, and I mean maybe part of that is just like, well, I'm not interested, which I get. But from a client's perspective, I've heard the same thing where somebody's called. They're like, you're the only person that called me back. And I'm like, how could that be? This is how we're making our livelihood. Like, how could that possibly be the situation? So, I think there is a lot of innovation and concentration that has to go into intake. So would you mind like to just step back for a little bit and kind of talk about what that has looked like over time? I mean, I don't know if like originally you were the person just answering all your own phone calls. Like how have you gotten to this space where the phone, answering the phone is a priority, which I think everybody would say that is the case, but then a lot of people, it's not by practice. So how have you kind of bridged that gap?
So actually, I'm still answering the phone, and I probably will my whole career. That's my personality. That's how I want to run the business. I'm not hiding behind, and I'm answering the phone if it's a speeding ticket or if it's an attempted murder case.
Yes.
That's just what I'm doing. I want when people text us, it's to be no different than when you text Amazon and they instantly text you back. Hey, how are you? Can I help you? We're trying to do that same exact thing. If you text our office, you will get an instant response, and it's not a computer or a robot; it's us. So we are, like I said earlier, I thought the hard part was getting the phone to ring. So if you can do the hardest part and then be there to answer and be there to text back, you got to capitalize. You've done the hardest thing. You got them to call your office. Now let's see what you can do when they call your office. But whether they call or text, you're getting instant service, 100%. I'm easy on my staff on a lot of things. I am not easy on that. We are answering and texting back. And once they do, we have a call log. Hey, this person's interested. And I'm usually right there. They'll text me. They'll chat me. Hey, someone's on the phone right now for this and this. What's a quote? Boom, hit them back. I'm not the only one signing people up. The whole office is signing people up. So as long as they're okay with the quote, and as long as we know we can help them, we're trying to sign them up. We're signing up, 5-10 people a day. So
yeah, I think that's so important, that availability, and I think setting the tone of that, with your own, leading by example on that front of being like, hey, the phone is kind of the most important thing. I've always had the mentality that the most important person at the office is the whoever's answering the phone. So whether that's intake, a paralegal, attorney, whoever's answering the phone, that's the most important person at your office. And obviously in some situations that can be multiple people, but that's definitely the most important position, because you're the face, well, at least the voice of the firm, if not the face of the firm as well. And I think that having that availability to the attorney when you're in the office is so powerful. It's one of the things that I think gives, kind of young, hungry lawyers a competitive advantage, is that availability, because there's a lot of firms where it is difficult to talk to the attorney that might be handling the case. You're talking to intake or paralegal, and again, maybe that person is really great in terms of conversation and making the client aware of what we're going to do. But when you have that ability to be like, hey, I'm the one, this is how things are gonna go. You can text me, call me. There's a lot of value in that I think is a competitive advantage in kind of that one man shop. And again, there's advantages to having a team as well. But that, I think that's one of those things that really is a competitive advantage for young lawyers.
Yeah, I get, some buddies that are like, hey, you're the boss. Why don't you just come golfing with us today? Like, you don't have to be there. My buddy James does that. My buddy Seth does that. Actually, it's the opposite. I gotta be here, and I will be here. So it's important. You gotta sign people up. They're going right down the Google list. Doop, doop, doop. That doesn't work. Next. Like you said, there's a lot of us. So I'm here. I'm gonna be available.
Yeah, that's huge. In terms of that, kind of conversation, whether it's kind of during that initial phone call or once they have retained your firm and you're kind of having a conversation with the client, what is kind of your philosophy or focus during that client conversation?
For criminal, I think it's important to know what kind of person you're dealing with. Rarely I'm dealing with a horrible person.
Yes.
Most of these people are great people.
Yep.
Who are in a bad situation, drug or alcohol problems, just young kids who are having a problem and can't get their life started. And, a lot of these times we're just connecting on the phone, not necessarily about the law, but hey, what are you doing? Let's get your life back together here. Let's help you out. You're not doing the right thing right now. I can tell after a few minutes that you're hanging out with the wrong people, or you're not making good decisions, or you're not serious about your life. So we're kind of connecting, getting that rapport in the beginning. Criminal defense money is important too. We got to pay the staff. We got to, we have to be retained. So we talk about that. I seem to feel like I'm one of the fewer attorneys that do payment plans. It doesn't seem like a ton of them out there do. We definitely offer one. I want to be flexible with these people. So it's really like, hey, I can help you. This is what you're looking at. I can't get too deep in your case until I get the video, until I get the case file. But let's work this out, and I'll represent you from the beginning to the end, or someone in my firm will.
Yeah, I think one of the major mistakes that I made early on in practice was, every client that called in, I kind of thought about each call as a case as opposed to a person. And so, when somebody would call in, I was going through this, like solely through this checklist of, okay, here's where, potential defense points are. Here is what, the consequences that this person is facing, look like. This is the potential outcome. Basically, here is the legal picture. And I think it's important to have that kind of filter and be able to communicate that to the client. But what you were just describing is that personal connection, and there's so much value that is brought through that once you start becoming, kind of people focused as opposed to the kind of case focused or matter focused mentality that I have. Once you've got that kind of people connection, now the attorney-client relationship is a trust relationship. And the way to build that trust is to get to know your client. And the way that you can probably most help that person beyond what happens in the courtroom is if there is, something deeper that has kind of driven this charge, DWI, drug case, whatever it might be. There's some deeper seated issue, helping that person see that and figure out kind of a better path forward is such a more valuable place to come to that client as counselor, as opposed to just kind of the legal minded attorney that's looking at all that. So I love that approach.
Yeah, that's definitely my approach. And someone who calls you for DWI, you're either going to be helping that person with a drinking problem, or it's going to be someone who wants to win the case. Frankly, someone calls you with a DVPO, they probably got a lot of stuff going on in their life that they need help with. If someone calls you with a break-in and entering, they probably got a drug problem. You got to help them with that. So I think as I've gotten more experience, I've noticed these charges and what kind of person that I'm usually dealing with, and I try to help them, and it's been successful. It's worked.
So for a DWI case or other kind of misdemeanor charge, felony case, what is kind of your process once you're hired in terms of case process, communication with client throughout the representation? What does that look like in terms of discovery and how you're kind of preparing the case for ultimate final court date?
So unfortunately, it is different for every client. Some cases move fast. Most of them do not. Most of them move very slow. Normally,
what's your process for kind of communicating that to the client? Because I think that's something that a lot of people don't kind of give clients a realistic time frame. Do you have a conversation about that with the client?
So that's one of the first things I tell them. This case is going to take between 3 months and 18 months. A lot of people don't understand that when you first start, and I set expectations right from the beginning. You might not hear from me the next week. That doesn't mean I'm not working on your case. That's because I like to use the phrase, you're at the back of the line or you're low on the totem pole. I'm in Mecklenburg County. You're not the only one being charged with this. Lots and lots and lots of cases. Not that many DAs. It's hard to get a client to understand that the DA is not looking at your case, is not concerned at the moment with the case. And they think they're back there planning or scheming or talking about your case. That's not how it works. I let them know how it works right from the beginning. And you might see me a lot in the beginning because we have a bond hearing or, there's initial stuff we need to do to begin the case. But unfortunately, we're just victims of this discovery process. We can't do a lot until we get the discovery and we get the video. So everyone's a little bit different, but setting the expectations, setting the timeline right from the beginning. For young attorneys out there, get your client in the office, before 2-3 weeks after they sign up. See what kind of person you're. They'll feel so much better if you show them a little bit of care. That for criminal law, a lot of people can practice criminal law. Frankly, you have a statute, interpret the statute, interpret the law, but most of this is client relations, client expectations.
100% agree.
Get them in the office, get a face-to-face with them. Tell them how it works. Make them feel good. Answer their questions. And you'll be setting off smooth sailing. If you don't do that, you're going to have some problems. I haven't heard from you. I don't know what's going on. That's a very common problem in our area of law. If you read Google reviews of other lawyers, or frankly, you get a lot of calls from people who are like, this is my attorney and this is not working out. And that seems to be the common problem because we're very, very busy as attorneys. So setting expectations is my number one goal in the beginning. Setting up how we're going to work this case, giving them the discovery. Give them the discovery as soon as you get them. Send them the video. They love seeing the video. They love it. So give them everything you have. Show them you care. You're going to do good in criminal defense.
There's this great scene in this chick flick, Kate and Leopold from way back when. I can't, there's probably been 20 years ago, but I use this scene a lot of times when describing this to the office of Leopold, who's like this guy, kind of English dude that is, kind of come into the future, very formal. He is using a dishwasher for the first time and basically is getting ready to put it on. And he likes this lady. So he's kind of like in her house doing the dishes, and his kind of girlfriend's brother comes in and is like, wait, you gotta wait to push the start button until she's in the room. If she doesn't see it happen, like then she didn't know that you did the dishes. And so it's like the show your homework kind of thing. Totally agree about that with clients. Anytime that you can share something with your client about the case, take advantage of that. If you file a discovery motion with the DA's office, share that with your client, show your work. If you, file a motion, something as simple as a motion to continue ahead of time, share that with the client, show that you're kind of doing stuff on their case. When you get the discovery back, send that to the client, go over it. Not only will that help you build a better defense, because when your client is involved and they get to see the report and they say, that's not what happened. I didn't say that thing, it's again, without that client feedback, it's like, they're the only person other than the officer that was at this situation, right? They're the only person. And so, you got to have those kind of conversations. And I love the point that you made about, basically like having this open conversation about the DA's office kind of not caring about their charge, because I do think a lot of clients think, they're having meetings with the officer about this case, they are figuring out, what expert witness that they might want to call. In reality, they don't understand, like, the DA is not looking at this file until, 9:36 the morning of court. Like, that's literally the first time that they're going to like look at that shuck. They don't know whether they need an officer to come into court. They don't know, what witnesses are involved. Like, basically they have in the case of a DWI, a yellow file with a, BAC number written on it or refute. I mean, that's literally like their entire viewpoint of the case. And I think that is something that, if you communicate that up front, and again, that this, from personal experience, not something I've always done a good job, even currently doing, is having that conversation with the client of, this is just not high priority for the DA's office. They're not concerned about your charge. They've got other fish to fry, so to speak, other people on their list, well ahead of you. So I think that that's such a powerful thing to communicate.
Right from the beginning, I like to tell them that.
Well, in terms of kind of the kind of trial tips, or if you want to call it like client experience tips, what advice would you have for young criminal defense lawyers, in terms of, case management, trial techniques? What, if anything, would you have in terms of advice for young lawyers?
So I have a new lawyer in my office. Her name's Kayla. And this is, we talked about this a lot recently, so this is fresh in my mind. First of all, think about it from the DA's perspective. They're throwing in guys right out of law school, young lawyers with no experience on these misdemeanors. So look at how they're looking at the case. It doesn't even seem like they really even care. So as a young lawyer or a seasoned lawyer, if you can be more prepared from them from the beginning. I mean, it seems like in district court, if you're more prepared than the other side, it goes a long way. Yes. I mean, it really does. It really, really does. It seems like the DAs a lot of times are faking it. They're exaggerating with DWIs, and they're getting the stuff out from the officer. I think for DWIs, I think defense attorneys, I think we need to get our client on the stand more, because the DA is doing so much talking and the officer is doing so much talking, and then our cross is 3 minutes. Do you have any evidence? No. And then it's our close. And it's like, it's hard to side with someone when they haven't had that much time on the floor and they've had the whole entire time. So I think that's something I want Kayla to do more in my office, and that's something I want to do more. I think we need to start, because you just learn as a defense attorney, don't have your client testify, don't have your client testify. I think we need to start having them up there. Now, it's definitely situational. So I've been thinking about that lately. But, one thing I like to tell Kayla, you have to win the argument, whether it's a motion to continue or a trial. Every time the DA is getting up there and passionately trying to convince the judge of something, you need to come over the top on that DA, and you need to convince the judge that you actually won the argument, not the DA. I think that kind of showsmanship does go a long way. I mean, I heard a DA the other day, an ADA, giving this passionate speech about a statute that wasn't even relevant, but she's more or less trying to win the judge over with passion, and it wasn't even relevant. I do think, unfortunately, you have to do some of that as a defense attorney, because if the ADA is going to do it, we have to go up there and put a show on too.
I think that's important from the client's perspective in particular. If you look like, not look like, if you are going to bat for your client, and that passion is genuine, your client will feel that. They'll feel like they have been that you're fighting for them, that you are advocating for their rights. And I mean, I've had plenty of times where, I've lost in the courtroom, and afterwards the client walks outside, they're like, man, you really gave it to him on that. I appreciate the passion of the argument. And so I think that is such a powerful piece. The other point that you just made in terms of preparation, I think that's so critical, because it's one of the few areas on most criminal charges that we have the advantage. Normally, in a lot of these cases, the facts is on the state side, the law is on the state side. So where do we have a competitive advantage? It is in preparation, because again, DAs walking into the courtroom, seeing the file for the first time, they don't know what witnesses they need to call. They have zero idea what their officer is going to say. They haven't watched the video. And so if nothing else, if you've had the chance to really with fine-tooth comb go through officer's report, video, have full conversation with your client, potentially talk to the officer or other state witnesses about the case ahead of time, you're, way ahead of the state on the preparation. And it's one of the few competitive advantages to the defense.
Yes. And you obviously need to know the law and DWIs, but I think the rules of evidence might be more important. If you know the rules of evidence and you can kind of run the show in the courtroom, say, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can do that. No, that doesn't come in, judge. I mean, because a lot of times that's what these DWIs come down to.
Yes.
I strongly recommend the North Carolina Evidentiary Foundation book in LexisNexis. My Lord, if you know that book, you are going to dominate in the courtroom. North Carolina Evidentiary Foundation, young attorneys out there, I think it's got 15 chapters. You are going to dominate, because you have to be able to lay that foundation and then you just go. And I love that book. I read it all the time. I think I read once that, I think someone was saying that if you read and try to study just 30 minutes a day for your entire career, you're going to beat everybody in the courtroom. So I think that's important too. But yeah, I'm big on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's, again, the more that you're kind of versed in the law and you're repeatedly showing that to the court. Obviously, in district court, we're in front of the same judges, day in, day out. It's a lot of familiar faces in the courtroom, and judges very quickly start to assess, is this somebody that has a basis for their argument, or is there just kind of a bunch of fluff being thrown every single time that this person argues in front of me? And when you know the rules of evidence and you're citing to specific rules, subsections, that even if it's basic, it's building in this kind of believability of argument that this attorney knows the law. So, one of the major points that I always, kind of talk to with young lawyers is that if you've got a sentencing hearing and, you're pointing to, specific mitigating factors, point out in the statute, this is 20-179, give the subsection of which specific mitigating factor that you're pointing out. It may feel a little bit strange. I mean, obviously the judge knows that the mitigating factors, but again, in terms of being able to show, I'm reading the law, I understand the statute, I think it can provide a lot of buy-in on that front. So I love the point on the evidentiary rules, because that's a great, easy way to really have that kind of constant impact of I'm reading the law, Judge.
And frankly, for DWI specifically, if you're not listening to this podcast, you're not doing yourself a favor. You've had huge names on this podcast. Anthony Policio with you got to take his class and you got to listen to his podcast. You had Chris Brooks on here. You have all these great attorneys on here. You have experts on here. This is a great resource.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, one of the best parts of doing the podcast from my side of things is every time that I have a guest on, I'm just constantly learning. And so, that's even if nobody else was listening, I would continue to do it because I'm getting so much out of it from what I'm learning during the conversations, the prep work for the episodes where I'm kind of doing solo episodes. But I really enjoy the guest podcast because there's just so much information, different ways of trial tactics, thinking through how to improve the client experience, points for cross-examination. I mean, I'm just, it's very self-beneficial doing this, week in, week out. So yeah, again, appreciate that, Tim, but, I totally agree that it's just, constantly trying to stay on that educational curve is so important. And like you said, if you're spending 30 minutes a day, trying to get better at your craft, over time, that is just going to have this incredible compounding effect. I mean, it's one of those things that, it just doesn't seem like it's going to move the needle very much in the, first week, first month, first year, and maybe it's not some huge needle point, but over time, as you continue to do that, huge compounding effect.
Yes.
So I guess, in terms of your development of kind of your practice, from the time that you hung your own shingle to now, you've got, a great team. Obviously, your branding is really killer in terms of, I think, putting the client in the hero position. Just a lot of the way that you're communicating representation and I'm your lawyer. It's very kind of client focused. And so what has kind of been some of the kind of biggest kind of growth areas as you've kind of developed the firm? What have been some of those kind of, aha moments along the way? Hey, podcast listeners, I want to briefly interrupt today's episode to invite you to join me at the inaugural Freedom Fighter Summit in Asheville this October. This in-person only event is designed for growth-minded lawyers determined to take their criminal defense practice to the next level. Due to the size of the summit's venue, there are a limited number of seats available. Don't miss out on the incredible lineup of speakers and spectacular networking opportunity that this summit provides. For more details, visit www.miniclaw.com/summit. Enter the promo code NCDWIGuy, all lowercase, all one word, at checkout for $150 off your summit ticket. Look forward to seeing you there. Now back to the show.
do got to pay to play on the internet. You do. I mean, if you want to get the calls, you gotta invest in your company, invest in the firm. That's important. Having a lot of lawyers in the office, I'm trying to grow and have more. That's very helpful. You can't do it all, so that's extremely beneficial. Is having people that can also take calls, speak with clients, so you don't have to do every single one. But I will say for criminal defense, there is a lot of clients. There is a lot of work out there. They will come to you. So we're lucky in that regard. Is there are so many cases. There are so many people who need help. There's so many conflicts with the public defender's office that they have to get an attorney. It hasn't been too difficult on the business side. I figured that out pretty quickly. Go to the Y in the morning, and then I'm on the phone and I'm ready to roll. I think that's one of the most important things, is being available in the phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again definitely
can't give all my secrets right now.
No, I mean, I think that setting the tone with the with phone being the priority, again, the leadership by example is sounds like such a huge part of the culture, and that's so important because, again, obviously the phone to some extent to a large extent is your livelihood, but it also tells the rest of the team that, us taking client calls and responding to client inquiries, whether that's, potential client or a current client, is a part of our identity, that we are here to communicate. And I think that, just having that as a, seeming core value of what you guys are doing is such a powerful core value.
It's number one priority. If you are writing a brief or if you're watching a video and the phone rings, that takes precedent. If you're in the middle of, you're going to hear something so important, nope, phone, number one.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And again, it's easy to say that. Living it out in practice is, different. And so again, when you're setting that tone by example and making that the priority, I think that's just such a trickle down effect in terms of making that a part of the culture. In terms of kind of on the flip side, what have been some kind of major roadblocks that you guys have gone through as your firm has kind of evolved over time?
The length of a case can be a problem. And here's what people don't understand that you alluded to earlier. In district court, everything happens on the day of court. They are opening the file for the first time, and everything happens on the day of court. So you really don't know until you get to district court. So it's kind of hard to tell people, I don't know. You got to wait until we get there. I'm going to talk to the DA once we get there. So, it's not necessarily a roadblock, but it can be, because you want to get a case done and the client wants to get the case done, but a lot of times you want to help them the most you can. So you can't just throw in the white flag. You got to go to court another time. So, that can be a bit of a problem. Also you got to show up for roll call in some of these counties and you can't be late. So time management can be a problem.
I think that's a huge problem. Do you have any kind of specific things that over the years you've kind of used as a framework for dealing with that?
Yes. Tell the client what time they need to be there. Tell them what they need to do. A lot of lawyers do not do that. I'm getting people. I'm walking into the courthouse. Have you seen him? Have you seen him? Da, 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 da. No. I got my own clients to worry about. But I think that when we're going to Cabarrus County, you don't have to get there at 9 o'clock. Get there at 10:30. Because there is no roll call. Don't bring your cell phone to the courthouse. You're not allowed to. We will be there. Wait patiently for us. I've gotten better at telling clients what time to come to court and what to expect beforehand. And that's so important, because when you're trying to run a business, but then you have people calling you from the courthouse saying, where are you guys, or what's going on? That's going to delay your business, because you got to help those people, obviously.
Yeah, I think, and it's one of those places where it either erodes or builds trust with the client. So, let's say you've got a client that's on for the first time. The county that you're practicing in, they have to be in court. It's going to get continued. So it's kind of a minor court date. So I think a lot of us, as lawyers, can kind of think, well, this is very minor. It's going to get continued. I know that it's like an automatic continuance. It's the first time on. So we'll move on. We'll get another court date, have time to review discovery, whatever it might be. Kind of as you're talking about, when the client walks into court, scary place, it's quiet, judges is up on the bench looking very, very stern. The bailiff is giving some instructions that, seem, important. They're trying to focus in on everything. And so, every second where they don't know what is going to happen is, kind of huge amount of anxiety. So if you've got a client where you're like, okay, we're just going to get a continuance tomorrow, and ahead of time that you've got to go to another county first before you get there. Client that doesn't know that you've not communicated that to walks into the courtroom and is just, freaking out when you're not there. It's like, did he remember to come to court with me today? Is this, going to be continued? The judge is asking me to fill out a waiver. I don't know what that means. Like, what am I signing right now? All of these kind of seemingly minor things really create a lot of friction and anxiety. Same client that you're like, look, you're going to go in. When your name is called, stand up, say my name. They're going to ask you to come up front. They're going to ask you to sign a waiver. That's fine. Just sign that. That means I'm representing you. I have to go to another county tomorrow. This is a bond hearing that has to happen at this specific time. I'll be over to Cabarrus or wherever it is, at 10:30. If the client knows all of that ahead of time, it's kind of like just a total different situation. And I do think that, you can really build a lot of trust with the client. Cause I don't think it's so much a frustration with being late, although sometimes that can be a point of friction, but I don't think that's the primary thing. It's, I don't know if my attorney remembered me, is kind of the bigger issue.
And that's what it turns into.
Yeah. Well, yeah, love that point. In terms of kind of other kind of core components of your culture beyond, just kind of like client, answering client inquiries, responding to clients, that's like, number one priority. What would you say are some of the other kind of like core values or core tenets of your firm?
So I would say our overall theme is we're on top of it. When someone emails us, we're emailing them right back. We're just staying on top of everything. We're not letting things slip through the cracks. So we're really, really on top of it. And I'm proud of my team, because they definitely have learned to do that. And it's really, really important. Then comes the client communications, like we talked about. That's really, really important. And then from there, are you prepared for the case? Because you gotta be prepared for the case. And if you're not doing your client a solid, because frankly, we charge a lot of money. And the reason we charge a lot of money is because it takes a lot of time and it's very important. And when it comes down to it, are you doing your part after you get paid to make sure you're prepared for the case? And I have not had a problem with that, because I definitely look at a client like, I gotta help this person. I gotta help this person, every single one. So that's also a core pillar, so to speak, is the preparation.
Love that. I think that the being on top of it is such a huge, that's a huge competitive advantage. There's so many people that have dealt with lawyers in the past, and that, it's kind of like, I can't get my attorney to call me back. I can't, the poor communication
it
is like,
seems like that's a lot of us. It seems
yeah,
like that's a lot of us.
yeah. Yeah. That, basically, like, this is one of the top bar complaints, right? Is like, this, I can't get my lawyer to communicate with me. And as soon as you kind of like, not only, do respond, but respond immediately, it really like sets you apart in the client's mind if they've, interacted with another lawyer, or just kind of, know this. I've had a ton of clients that are, have a conversation with them, and they'll be like, look, I know your time is valuable. You're busy. Like, I just want to make sure. And it's kind of like, well, everybody's time is valuable. I mean, if that's kind of your perception of like, we've got to have this like very, quick, very, brief conversation. I'm here. Like, I'm here until we've gotten all your questions answered. But I think that immediate response, it really sets the tone in terms of like, man, again, trustworthiness. It's as much as it is like getting the right answer, it's just a trustworthiness factor of like, I know these people are doing what they can. So again, if there is a delay, I know it's not my attorney that's causing it, because every single time that I talk to them, they immediately get back. So it's got to be, something else that is the cause for delay. So there's just so much of a value point from that immediate response time.
Yeah, and if you're a young attorney watching this, a lot of this conversation thus far hasn't been about the DWI statute or probable cause, and I'm happy to talk about that. But it's from a running a firm perspective, it's things that are actually relatively easy: communicating with clients, answering the phone, and being on top of it. That you have to do if you want to be successful.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's really where the focus has got to be, because, the client expects that, the law, right? Forwards and backwards. That's why they're hiring a lawyer, is because you're, in their opinion, the expert in this arena. So that's like the given, that's the expectation, is my client or my attorney knows the law, is going to do a good job in the courtroom. Where there's kind of a opportunity to kind of surprise and delight is really in the arena of the client experience, which is all of the things that you're really pushing on that front, which is so valuable. Well, I kind of to maybe shift gears for just a second, Tim. I again, as you are growing your team, and kind of have other lawyers and staff that are kind of helping with client cases, what has been your process for hiring and training? Because I think this is one of the areas that, if you're a young lawyer, you kind of get to that point where it's like, I need help. I don't have enough time. You kind of hire out of necessity. You don't do a good job training, it doesn't go well. You're like, man, I could just do this better on my own. I really think it's one of the friction points of, going from, one person to that first hire is a giant leap for a lot of people. I've got to figure out, can I afford to pay somebody else to help me with cases? So what does that look like on your end?
Yeah, I like this topic. I'll never forget, Chip Panett, and I wish I remember the quote. He told me a quote about a boat, and it was really good. But basically what he was getting at is, if you have someone else helping you with a job, and maybe you would do it better, but they at least give you 70 or 80%, that's okay. You have to be okay with that. And I kind of did start to learn that. That it doesn't have to be perfect every time. Let someone else do it, and if they're doing a pretty damn good job, let them get away with that and move on to your next thing.
Yeah, I think to that point, to just stop you real quick, I think there's this mindset that is so ridiculous. I've definitely had this, at times in the past, where it's like, other people at the firm don't seem to care as much as I do. And it's like, yeah, damn straight, they don't care as much as you do. Like
Yeah.
it's like that's such a crazy expectation to be like, this is not something that, everybody at the office is losing sleep over this case tomorrow, nor would you really want that for your team. But yeah, I love that point.
Yeah, and as far as new hires become here, for whatever reason, I'm not sure 100% why, but the majority of my applications are young people, uh, really young. I just hired someone who's 21. They're not going to realize till they're my age, 35, how young 21 really is. And so what I've been getting is young people, and that's fine. And I tell them all the same thing. It's okay to make mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And I want them making mistakes. If they're not making mistakes, we're having a problem. And I know you're not trying hard enough. And that really lets them know it's
Yeah, that's
okay.
awesome.
It's okay to make a mistake. And I promise you, I want you to make a mistake, because you will not learn unless you make mistakes. I can't sit there all day and say, this is how you answer this question. I want you to try it. I want you to make a mistake, and then I'm going to teach you why that was wrong. And when that happens, that clicks way better.
That's awesome.
So you got to make mistakes.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard that kind of presented in this positive light. I've heard routinely, this conversation during, a onboarding session, or kind of early on in somebody kind of joining a company, that, here at our company, our firm, whatever it might be, it's okay to make mistakes. The only thing that it's kind of, not okay to do is to just not communicate that, to cover it up. So basically kind of giving permission to make mistakes, but that's actually very different than actually, encouraging mistakes. And I think it's so much more powerful to kind of encourage the mistakes. So the best lessons that I've learned in practicing law, in business, in sports, whatever it might be, have all been through mistakes. I mean, that really is the best learning opportunities. And once you've made that mistake and you realize a better course of action, it clicks. You can read about it in books as much as you want. You can talk to all the experts in the community. Until you've gone through that trial and error process yourself, it's just not going to have that kind of click moment.
And right. And then I found myself saying to the clients all the time, it's amazing how a negative can turn into a positive. And a lot of these people are getting charged with stuff. It is a negative, and then it turns into a positive in their life. So that's quite remarkable too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Tim, as we kind of come to a close here, in terms of any kind of one piece of advice for lawyer listening to the podcast, what would be kind of your number one point to drive home of anything that we've talked about today, or any other practical tip?
You got to fight. Don't walk in the courthouse and just take the deal and walk out. Your clients aren't stupid. They're gonna know what's going on. You gotta fight. You gotta talk to the officer. You gotta watch the video. You gotta fight. If you get that reputation and that desire to fight, you're gonna become more confident. It's gonna become easier. Okay. What I've learned is I want the case to be over with and have a happy client. You can't do that unless you're fighting. And they will appreciate that, win or lose.
So, totally agree. I love that. I think that the warrior mentality, that fighter mentality, is what so many clients are really looking for in a criminal defense lawyer. I mean, it's kind of like, is this person going to hold the state's feet to the fire, whether that's at a trial or, in arguing that I should get the best sentencing outcome. Like, this is very clearly a, state versus me situation. It's a again, there's a winner and loser in this to some extent. Like, I mean, even on a plea situation, there's a outcome that could be, great and an outcome that could be problematic, and so I think that fighter's mentality is so critical, and you do establish that reputation. It's something that again, just to kind of speak to your branding, I think that this is something that is, you really have nailed that as part of your brand, that I'm a fighter for my clients. Like every kind of all of the written content on your site, your videos, they communicate a warrior. And that's such a powerful messaging. It's not something that you even really have to kind of say it in that way. It's just the way that you carry yourself, the way you talk, communicate. All of those things are communicating that fighter mentality. So I love that piece of advice, and you're branding on that front very well.
Yeah, I got to thank my mom for that, for letting me kind of learn how to do it. And she always just let me try to learn. And that's just what happened. I really appreciate my mom for that.
That's awesome. I mean, hey, these things sometimes get instilled at a very young age, and that's I mean, you got to use the natural gifts that you have in every endeavor, especially in business. So, well, I love it, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing, the trial tips, client communication tips, how to build a practice. It's been a super fun conversation.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm a huge fan. You have a huge courtroom presence. I've seen you in action. I hope you keep doing some cases here and there, but please keep it up. You're building an unbelievable practice. I mean, come on. You want to talk about me? Look how far you've come. I mean, it's really remarkable. So
it's been fun. It's definitely a work in progress, and it's been a fun ride so far.
I appreciate Lance in your office. He's really helpful. Christian Dewar is an excellent attorney. I know you got a bunch of great attorneys now, so good for you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate it.